Eagles Entertainment.
With the 13th pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, presented by LifeBrand. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and today we're going to begin our draft recap series where myself, Ben Fennell, Dane Brugler, we're going to take a look at two divisions, AFC East and NFC East. We've got a bunch of categories we're going to get to with those 8 teams and just take a look at their draft overall, top down. What did they do? What were their goals? How did they accomplish those goals with a couple different superlatives? And we'll do all that over the next couple of weeks here, going around the NFL. We'll cover all 32 teams here in this series. And again, myself, Ben Fennell, Dane Brugler here today. We're going to do it here for Draft Buzz. We've got a couple of your comments as well in our draft mailbag. The best way to throw us your support, head on over to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify, wherever you listen. Leave us a rating, leave us a review. If you leave a comment with a question, we will answer it here on an upcoming episode. That said, let's get into it. Excited to break down some teams here. It's time for Draft Buzz.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, let's get into Draft Buzz here as I welcome in Ben Fennell and Dane Brugler. And guys, let's start with the NFC East. And we're going to start, obviously, with the Philadelphia Eagles. The three of us have already talked through these draft choices for the Eagles, but we'll kind of use this as a template and just talk about the class as a whole. We'll start with first-round pick Jordan Davis, the top choice for the Eagles. They move up from 15 to 13 to select him. Dane, in your mind, why was Jordan Davis the pick here for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Because Howie Roseman loves his big defensive tackles, and Jordan Davis is a mammoth defensive tackle who is just very unique. And it was a match that made a ton of sense. It was just, okay, was he still be on the board at 15? Turns out Howie wasn't going to let that, wonder if that was going to happen or not. He goes and gets Jordan Davis. You look at who they have on the roster already. Wasn't like that number one need if you're going to list all the Eagles' needs, but it was someone that they're willing to bet on as being a foundational player for their defense and what they want to do up front. And clearly they see upside with him as a pass rusher. And we know that he could be a dominant run defender, but to trade up for him, take him at number 13, clearly the Eagles see a player that is going to give them a little more pass rush than what we saw on tape.
And look, for anybody that's listening, that's not an Eagles fan, and you're putting together your mock drafts next year, you can never go wrong going line of scrimmage with the Eagles. Offensive line, defensive line, that is the philosophy. They are not afraid to share that publicly. That is always where they're going to lean. Howie said it during the Cam Jurgens press conference last weekend was when things are equal, if all things are equal, we're going to the line of scrimmage. And so you always just keep that in mind. It's a big reason why Jordan Davis was such a high value for this team. Let's go to the next category here. And Ben, I'll bring you in. Surprise impact. Who's a guy from this draft class that you feel like could shock us with the impact they have in year one?
Well, I think that's easily outside linebacker Kyron Johnson. I think his floor as kind of a special team stalwart is immediately going to be able to, create some impact and get on the field. But his Sam linebacking role in that hybrid kind of scheme that Jonathan Gannon likes to deploy, I think he's a perfect fit there. And then at the very end of the day, let's just use him as a rush specialist, because he's a guy that can win one-on-one, yet also very athletic to loop and doing some stunts in games, used as a blitzer from depth. And one extra caveat, maybe a QB spy. So there's a lot of things you can do with him in a sub-package role, on some early down roles as a Sam linebacker, which not a lot of people play Sams in the way Jonathan Gannon does. And then his special teams impact. Kyron Johnson, I think, could surprise us with how much he plays this season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Eagles went out and signed Hassan Reddick this offseason, and he's going to be the starter at that Sam linebacker spot. But I would imagine that Kyron's going to battle with last year's 7th-round draft choice, Patrick Johnson, for that backup role. Jannard Avery no longer in Philadelphia, so there's a spot up for grabs there behind Hassan Reddick, and it's going to be a really good battle this summer. Kyron Johnson, kind of a souped up Patrick Johnson. I actually wrote Patrick Johnson down as a comp while I was studying him, and he's tested a little bit better. I think when you look at Johnson, he's a really, really intriguing player moving forward. Dane, let's stick on day 3. Really only day 3 selections here for the Eagles. Kyron Johnson was one. Grant Calcaterra, the tight end from SMU, the other. So if we go through day 3 ceiling, which guy has the highest ceiling of these day 3 picks? Is it Calcaterra or is it Johnson in your mind?
I mean, I have to go with Johnson. And I did want to give a shout out to Cam Jurgens, because I think he would be the answer here if we were talking about day 2 and day 3. I'm such a big fan of Jurgens, and I love the fit there. But speaking just day 3, I think, it's got to be Kyron, and a lot of what you and Ben just talked about, a guy that is a big time athlete and gives you a lot of rush potential. And he's a guy that maybe looks small when you just look at him. So especially in this scheme with the Eagles and what they like to do in terms of getting their pass rushers, giving them opportunities on the outside, I really like what Kyron Johnson can grow into in this scheme.
All right, let's go big picture here, Ben. When you look at this Philadelphia Eagles draft class, and I'll let you decide whether or not you're going to include A.J. Brown or not, but regardless, even if you just look at the draft choices, just any big takeaways from their approach, what it says about their team moving forward into this season, and big picture just in terms of draft philosophy.
Yeah, and just a big picture assessment and taking kind of a 2-year sample size, looking at the 6 picks they've made in the first 3 rounds. 4 of them have come from national championship teams. And this is something I harped on right when we made those picks last week. The 2 from Alabama and Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson last year, on top of Jordan Davis, and then the absolute steal of Nakobe Dean in the 3rd round. These are program-changing players. These are culture-changing players that come with a lot of confidence, a lot of attitude, and high expectations to win, and win immediately, because they've always been winners. They step on the field expecting to win. So these are guys that I think are very infectious in the locker room, in the meeting rooms, in the building, on top of being some pretty good football players between the lines as well. But just a big picture, I love going after these high caliber prospects from high caliber programs that are used to winning. I think they're going to fit in here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think that's been a really interesting trend over the last couple of seasons. Howie Roseman alluded to that on that day 3 press conference. Was like, look, sometimes we make it a little too hard and we try and overthink this a little bit. Take good players who are good kids from good teams, and sometimes that's a nice way to just kind of follow that kind of blueprint. Let's move now to the New York Giants, and let's go with their first of 2 first-round draft choices here. Kayvon Thibodeaux, the pass rusher from Oregon. They select him at number 5 here, Ben. In your mind, why was Kayvon Thibodeaux the selection here for the G-Men?
Well, I think they had a clear need of needing a disruptive playmaking presence on that defensive line. And if you don't have one on the line in the front 7 in the NFL, you are swimming uphill without a paddle. So I think they needed somebody to just start affecting offenses more, creating high-level plays when they get into some advantageous situations that he can play and be an absolute nightmare for opposing blocking schemes and offenses. I think Kayvon Thibodeaux is an exceptional athlete, explosive, and literally checks every box they need as far as being a playmaker on that defensive front. So clearly a need, clearly a high value player, clearly a pretty good marriage there at the top of the draft.
I feel like so many of us penciled in offensive tackle when we're doing our mock drafts and looking to the Giants at number 5. Didn't really take into account like, well, if they like a bunch of these tackles, because we had talked about there were lots of reports that they loved Charles Cross, Evan Neal was connected to them, Aquana was connected to them. Well, when they're on the clock at number 5, they've got their choice of the 3, and if they liked multiple of those guys, well, they were going to get one of those guys. One of those was going to fall to number 7. And so it made sense for them to go with Thibodeaux there at number 5. You guarantee you get your pass rusher, and then you get a tackle that you like there with number 7. Dane, I'll come to you now for surprise impact. Who's a player from this Giants draft class who you feel could shock us with the impact they have here in year 1?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a pick that was widely panned, and that's Wan'Dale Robinson. I think I understand why there were a lot of critics with this pick, considering what other receivers were left. But just talking about the player and the fit, I think they drafted Wan'Dale Robinson with a clear understanding of what he does and a clear path to get on the field and plan for him to be productive. So, he's a guy that you just want to get him the ball and let him create, use that open field vision, use that athleticism where he can go create. And I think that's, it's Kadarius Toney in, Wan'Dale Robinson, or Kadarius Toney out, Wan'Dale Robinson in. And I mean, you look at this offense with Daniel Jones and, with the new coaching staff, the new front office, I think they look at Wan'Dale Robinson as this big time weapon that they could really utilize in different ways. So I don't think you're drafting Wan'Dale Robinson where they drafted him in the early 2nd round without a clear plan for him. And so I think that, we could see him be more productive than maybe we initially thought.
And guys, Brian Daboll coming over from Buffalo, let's just plug him right into that Isaiah McKenzie role, who could be an inside number 3 in trips, running crossers, could be in the backfield taking handoffs, could be catching passes out of the backfield. I think trying to kind of project a role, I think that that role from Isaiah McKenzie and what he did for the Bills and Brian Daboll is a perfect kind of 1-for-1 there for Wan'Dale Robinson.
But I also think it's important not to forget that not only is Brian Daboll there as the head coach, but Mike Kafka is the offensive coordinator coming over from Kansas City. And you know the kinds of ways that they've used talents like Wan'Dale in Kansas City, right? And so I think that there's a lot of different directions that pick could go. I think all three of us were high on Robinson. So I'm interested to see what his impact could be in year one. Ben, that was a day 2 selection. When you look at day 3, who's the guy that you feel from these day 3 picks has the highest ceiling there for the Giants?
Well, I feel like this has to be Daniel Bellinger out of San Diego State, who I think has a lot of upside to begin with based on the scheme, but more of a run-leaning offense there at San Diego State. Wasn't featured in the pass game, sniffed over 300 receiving yards just once in his career, just not featured. But he had to do a lot of the dirty work, so I know he can play some inline, wide tight end, wrangle and wrestle with some defensive ends. He's even put some on their back. Very competitively tough kid. And looking at the depth chart, I think he's a starting wide tight end right out of the gate. I see Ricky Seals-Jones here, who's a little bit more of a hybrid type of player. This guy's going to have his hand in the turf, maybe right off that right tackle, Big Evan Neal, most of the time. And I think the sky is the limit for this kid because he's going to block his butt off. He's going to get some opportunities in play action, put the ball in his hands in the red zone. I'm really excited for his opportunity. I think that's a great landing spot as a 4th-round pick to be an immediate day 1 starter.
There are snaps to be had there for the Giants at that position. Dane, big picture here. This was the first draft for Joe Schoen at general manager, Brian Daboll at head coach, those guys together. Any takeaways from the way they approached this one? Obviously, they came in with a lot of draft capital.
Yeah, and I think that you look at their class, and they did a lot of interesting things from not shying away from Kayvon Thibodeaux and being like, you know what, we like his competitiveness, we like the athlete, we like the player. Let's bring him on our team. I talked to the Giants people early in the process, January, February, and they thought Thibodeaux was not going to be an option for them. Just be, first-year general manager, first-year head coach. Like, can you really take a personality like that when you're trying to build a culture? They didn't shy away from that. So that was interesting. And then I think you look at on day 2, they didn't shy away from maybe some body types that were a little, different than what you usually see. I mean, Wan'Dale Robinson, the shortest arms we've ever seen at wide receiver. And then Cordell Flott, one of the skinniest, most slender corners in this draft. And so I thought it was, whether or not they were overdrafted or not, I mean, time will tell, but it was interesting that they really did. And then you got Big Evan Neal, who's, mammoth in the first round, but they didn't shy away from different types of body types and maybe didn't fitting perfectly in certain boxes, certain thresholds, what they normally want at those positions.
Yeah, I mean, the three of us all know that certain teams have thresholds at all the body types and all these different positions. So for a team to show in year 1 that they're not afraid to go, with those undersized guys, whether it's the weight with Flott, whether it's the arm length with Wan'Dale, I think that is definitely important moving forward. Let's now transition to the Dallas Cowboys. Dane, this is a team that you know well, but Ben, I'm going to come to you for their first-round draft choice. That's Tyler Smith, the left tackle from Tulsa. In your mind, why was he the selection here for the Cowboys the back half of round 1?
Well, they lost 2 starters on the offensive line in free agency, and Connor Williams to the Dolphins and Lyle Collins to the Bengals, not to mention a bit of some injuries and lack of consistency on that group over the past 2-3 years. Maybe some down the road insurance for Tyron Smith, who missed 5-6 games last year as well. They're hoping he bounces back to the player they expect him to be, but clearly a need on the offensive line. I think he fits the kind of temperament and the style that Cowboys offensive line unit can protect him a little bit at that left guard spot. I still see the center position as pretty fluid. Should be a nice competition this summer with some undrafteds and Alec Lindstrom and James Empey with Biadas and Faranoak as well. But Tyler Smith, clear need on the offensive line. Could be a tackle down the road. Slide him into guard early. Checking boxes of need and a high-level prospect.
And when we talk about guys that could have a surprise impact, who could shock us here as a rookie this season?
It's got to be Jalen Tolbert, their 3rd rounder. And it's just so much of this matches up with when they drafted Michael Gallup 4 years ago, group of 5 team, a guy that maybe wasn't a great tester, but just a good football player. And you watch the film and you see a guy that can manipulate routes, that can shift his gears really, really well to get defenders off coverage or off balance in their coverage. And then a guy that can win downfield with the catch point skills, the adjustments. So Jalen Tolbert, with Michael Gallup coming back from the ACL, Mari Cooper no longer in town, CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert, these two players, I think are going to be, your starters at the Cowboys wideout position in week 1.
It's funny. I actually wrote down Gallup while I was studying Tolbert. So a guy that, kind of fits that mold. And as you mentioned, there are snaps there to be had. A reason why he could make an impact here in year 1. Let's go now to day 3, Ben. Which of their day 3 picks do you feel like has the highest ceiling in terms of what they could be down the road?
Well, this is going to pay me not to pick Fresno State corner Deron Bland, who they took in the 5th round, who I think could be a shoo-in to eventually be a starter by season end there at corner spot opposite of Trayvon Diggs. But I got to go with tight end Jake Ferguson out of Wisconsin. But I think it's a perfect U tight end, second tight end option there. They have Dalton Schultz as the inline guy, but I think he has the size to be a wide tight end if he needs to. He has the willingness in the run game. He is very athletic. He has great hands. Very sudden and sharp at the top of the routes. It's going to be an absolute red zone, third down, middle of the field nightmare in that offense. I really think Jake Ferguson is going to be a weapon in the pass game, and he will be on a lot of fantasy teams by the time that season ends there. I could see him being an 8-10 touchdown guy in that type of offense, especially if Dalton Schultz can kind of bang with the defensive ends and do some dirty work, and Jake Ferguson gets all the capitalization, off play action and in the pass game. Jake Ferguson, Wisconsin, I really see his stock rising and rising, and his ceiling is very high.
And we've got a nice sample size here with Will McClay, who's the vice president of player personnel running the draft for the Dallas Cowboys. But any big takeaways from their approach this year? Are there things that are like, okay, this is something just to file away for down the road?
Well, this team will lock into what they want to do. We see it every year. Whether they want to add a pass rusher, they're going to add a pass rusher. If they want to, this year is all about offense. And I think if the right receiver was still there, like a Traylon Burks, that's the direction they would have gone. They wanted to go offensive line though, and Zion Johnson, Kenyon Green off the board. Tyler Smith, they were comfortable with. They had a second-round grade. They had a high second-round grade on Tyler Smith. They entertained some offers to move back, but at the end of the day, they knew there's a chance, because I know of 2 teams behind the Cowboys that wanted to draft Tyler Smith. So they stayed put. They drafted him. And I will be very surprised if Tyler Smith is not your starting left guard. That was the goal of this pick at 24. The Cowboys wanted to find their starting left guard, and I'll be very surprised if Tyler Smith, week 1, is not the starting left guard. And then, like Ben mentioned earlier, he is the heir apparent at left tackle. That's their hope, is that he could grow into that left tackle of the future. But for right now, they wanted to fill that left guard spot. Jerry's tired of the offensive line not being mentioned where it was, 3-4 years ago. He wants to get back on that level. And, we'll see how Terrence Steele holds up at right tackle, replacing Leo Collins. We know Zach Martin's still going to be Zach Martin. Left guard was a little bit of a question mark going into the draft. This is the answer that the Cowboys are hoping that Tyler Smith can be.
I feel like we've heard enough of that buzz of like Jerry Jones is sick of the offensive line not being one of the elites in the league anymore. As soon as you hear that, it goes back to your first point, like create a shopping list for the Cowboys, and they just want to go check the items off the list. So offensive line really seemed like that was going to be the primary target early in this draft. Let's go now round out the NFC East with the Washington Commanders. Ben, their top choice. They end up going here with wide receiver Jahan Dotson in a trade down. Thoughts here on Jahan Dotson ending up here? Why do you feel like he was the selection after the trade down for Washington?
Well, it was no secret they were looking for an alpha receiving threat opposite of Terry McLaurin, someone to take some attention, some safety attention, maybe create some opportunities as well for Terry McLaurin. I think Jahan Dotson checks all those boxes. His route running ability, his catch radius, I think is really going to be advantageous in that offense, and his playmaking ability, whether it's short, intermediate, down the field. 3-level threats between Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. That is a wicked 1-2 combination. So I think just trying to draw some attention, some coverage. I think they're going to help each other out. Finding a high-level player opposite of a high-level player, that's how you fill out your offense. So I'm excited for the Commanders heading into 2022.
Plenty of buzz that they were really high on both Garrett Wilson and Drake London. So those guys going off the board 8 and 10. It seems like that might have kind of pointed their direction towards the trade out in that spot. Dane, when we look at surprise impact for this team in year 1, who do you think stands out most?
Brian Robinson, running back. Some people thought he might have been a little overdrafted, but I think this team was looking for a little more power. A guy that could be that one cut and go, and not going to be dancing, not going to be maybe thinking too much. He's going to take the rock. He's going to get a little bit of patience, a little bit of vision. But more than anything, he's just going to look to run the daylight. And Brian Robinson can do that in the passing game. He can do that as an inside runner. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Brian Robinson see the field very early and get a lion's share of those touches.
They were sniffing around all the top backs. I mean, they did top 30s with Breece Hall, with Kenneth Walker. So it felt like, okay, like they're going to draft a back early. That's why after the Dotson pick, you saw a lot of things like, oh man, this Washington offense really comes together, and you have Antonio Gibson and the receivers, and you go down the list, and it's like, well, I think they're still going to keep adding to it, and they ended up doing that there with Brian Robinson. Ben, when you look at day 3, which player do you feel like has the highest ceiling for this group?
There's a couple intriguing options out there. I'm really glad they grabbed Percy Butler, who I think is a really interesting safety, special team stalwart there out of Louisiana, who's just been pumping players in the NFL the past few years on both sides of the football, tested in the 4-3s, which you see routinely on his punt coverage, kickoff coverage. So the special teaming floor. And then let's see where he can work into the back end of that defense, which I see a secondary that is extremely fluid and is extremely open season for competition and spots and snaps and starting positions and sub roles. So I see Percy Butler show up to camp with some confidence, because I'm coming after all those starting roles if I were him. Free safety, strong safety, nickel, wherever I can get on the field. I hope they have a lot of competition on the back end this summer.
Dane, when you look at big picture here with Washington, now we're in, I believe this was the 3rd draft with Ron Rivera and with Marty Herney there. Martin Mayhew, this was his first go-around as having the full season there as general manager. Just big picture, any takeaways from their approach here in 2022?
Well, first and foremost, I don't care who's making the decisions. They love their Alabama defensive linemen.
They do.
I mean, another one in the top 50 with Mathis, which was maybe a little bit earlier than we thought he'd go. But, this was not a strong defensive tackle class. So if you didn't get your guy maybe early on, you might have been left with not your first choice. But it was surprising to see Mathis go ahead of Travis Jones and some of these other defensive tackles. I thought it was really interesting that they must have had a very similar grade with Jahan Dotson, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, because they traded away from those guys. They had to have known, okay, we moved this pick here at 11. We're probably not going to be able to get Olave or Jameson, and because we're moving too far back. But they were okay with that. That's how much they love Jahan Dotson. I think that really says something about how they stacked their wide receiver group this year.
It's a really, really good point. And it's funny, the Alabama thing, because people thought like, oh, that was Kyle Smith, who was previously the VP of player personnel before this new regime came in. And he had drafted Alabama player after Alabama player after Alabama player. They acquired Landon Collins in free agency. And then they go right back to it here this year, which is really funny to see. Let's go now to the AFC. And obviously one of the big stories of round 1, one of the big surprises, Chattanooga left guard Cole Strange going to the New England Patriots here, Ben. Why was Cole Strange the pick in your mind? Obviously, it was after a trade down, but give us your thoughts here on the Strange selection for the Patriots.
Well, they not only had a need at that center right guard spot with Shaq Mason gone, Ted Karras gone, so they had some positional needs. But this is more of a philosophical need as well, because this team is going to come out running the football, and running the football like they always have. And we're going to protect the young second-year quarterback in Mac Jones. That's their philosophy. 4th highest rushing percentage last year. They would like that to be even higher, I think, going into 2022 and years after that. So you have to keep adding coals to the furnace there, and that's on the offensive line. So you cannot neglect the offensive line group when you philosophically want to lean on the run game and let everything bloom and blossom off of that. So I think it addressed a need they had clearly at right guard. I think he'd be a day 1 right guard, maybe a center of the future, as we saw him play quite a bit of center down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. Looked pretty good at doing that. But at the end of the day, this team wants to run the ball. You can't get away with a bunch of undrafteds and just stopgaps on the offensive line.
All right, well, let's go to a surprise impact here, Dane. Who's a guy that could shock us with what they're able to do on the field here as a rookie this fall?
I wrote down Marcus Jones here, and I think that he's been out of sight, out of mind because he wasn't able to go to the Senior Bowl with double shoulder surgery. So no combine, no workouts, period, for Marcus Jones. I thought that was going to drop him into the 4th round. But I thought this is a 3rd round player, maybe even higher, a day 2 player based off of the tape, based on the production, based off of what he's going to bring to your team, both as a returner and as a nickel player, a nickel corner. And the Patriots, they stuck true to that, even with those injury concerns, and they drafted him there. So he's going to be healthy by training camp. At least that's what they're saying. And so even though he's been off the radar a little bit, just in terms of being in our consciousness, Marcus Jones, I think, it's interesting. They drafted a few quote unquote smaller players, smaller corners. And so, they didn't shy away from those smaller guys. They went with football players. Marcus Jones, he is that. He's tenacious. He's competitive. He gets his hands on the football. You love the speed. You love the twitch that he plays with. So I think Marcus Jones is going to make an impact pretty quickly as a rookie.
And by the way, the one big thing that you always see consistently with New England, guys that can impact not just their side of the ball, but also special teams. And Marcus Jones, the best returner, arguably, in this class with what he's done. So I think that's certainly a big thing to take away from that selection. Let's go now to day 3. Ben, who's got the highest ceiling of their day 3 selections?
Well, I love the fit and the opportunity for running back Pierre Strong Jr. at a South Dakota State 4th-round pick. And if you look at the pecking order of all these running backs, they have the bangers and Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, drafted Kevin Harris out of South Carolina in round 6. That kind of fits their mold. And then it's Pierre Strong, J.J. Taylor, and James White as kind of the scat back, third down, change of pace guy, undersized guy. And I think Pierre Strong is going to be an excellent dual threat, third down back, change of pace back for those leading guys that are going to really wear down defenses on early downs. Catches the ball very well, whether it's beating linebackers one-on-one or down the field, yards after catch, productive player. I'm circling James White on the roster and saying I'm coming for that spot because James White is kind of on a prove-it deal. He's on the wrong side of 30, coming off of that hip injury from last year. I'm not saying James White's a lock to make this roster. So I think Pierre Strong can seal up that third down running back spot and catch a lot of passes on third down from Mac Jones. I think Pierre Strong is a heck of a player, tested well, great week at Shrine, huge career at South Dakota State, stacking all those boxes. I hope he gets on the field.
Ben, who's not making the roster at running back for the Patriots? I mean, it's just a crazy group of players. I mean, it's really interesting that they drafted 2 running backs. So who's the odd man out in that group?
I could see them rolling with 4 and Harris and Stevenson, Damian Harris, that is, Ramondre Stevenson, and then probably 2 out of these next 4 between White, Strong, Kevin Harris, and J.J. Taylor. It could come down to who's going to run down on special teams for us. J.J. Taylor's probably a little small. Kevin Harris probably isn't doing that, a little big. I think Pierre Strong is kind of right in that market to say, I'll do it. Whatever you need, I can do it. You want me to run between the tackles on first down? I'll do it. You want me to run an angle route on third down? I'll do it. Want me to line up in the slot? I'll do it. I just think he can check more boxes than the rest of that group.
All right. Well, Dane, big picture thoughts here on the Patriots and the way that they went through this draft weekend and what it means for their philosophy overall.
The Patriots don't give a what about what any of us think about our draft boards or what they should do, or they just don't care. And they're another team that likes to fill needs in the first round. And so I think they wanted to fill that left guard need. And as soon as just a guard need, and as soon as Zion Johnson was off the board, that's when, okay, we can trade back from 21. We know Cole Strange is our guy. And the Patriots have one of the smallest draft boards every year, 75, 90 names. And so if they didn't see a huge drop off between a Zion Johnson and a Cole Strange, then, they're going to trust their board. So as soon as you get to training camp, it doesn't matter where you're picked to Bill Belichick. He's going to play the best players. And so it's just a kind of a reminder that the Patriots do things their way. They operate their way. A lot of times it backfires in their faces. They've had a lot of busts in the first and second round over the years, but at the same time, they've also hit on enough guys that keeps them competitive. We'll see if Cole Strange ends up doing that for them.
I thought I saw a copy of the Beast printed out in their draft room, though, Dean. Unfortunately, it was just propping up the wobbly table in the room. I don't think they were really using it, but
that sounds about right.
Let's get to the Buffalo Bills here, guys. The top choice, obviously, they trade up for Kaiir Elam. They make a deal to move up a couple of spots here, Ben. Your thoughts on why Kaiir Elam was the pick here for Buffalo?
Well, listen, Sean McDermott likes these players, but Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson played a combined 1,700 snaps last season. That wasn't by design or by intent. They need somebody consistent opposite of Trey White, that you got to be hybrid. You have to have some zone toughness, but you got to have man pedigree and ball skills and be able to play some island, what we call eraser coverage, which is take this guy and make him go away. because Sean McDermott plays a variety of coverages out there. He asks a lot out of those secondary members. He's got 3 pretty good ones, and Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Trey White out there. Now they got a 4th high level, and Kyrie Elam out of Florida, who checks all those boxes. Perfect need, perfect fit. I think that's one that was really gaining steam down the process, and I'm glad they landed him.
Dane, when you look at the rest of their draft, is there a guy that you look at as having a year one impact that could take us by surprise?
I mean, I have to go with Khalil Shakir here. Getting him in the 5th round, and you introduce him into that offensive role, whether it's probably going to be in the slot. I know they signed James Crowder, but I think Shakir is going to make them kind of share that role. And, you let him work the middle of the field, give him some of those catch and run opportunities. I just think that was a really good pickup for a team looking for, like the last pieces of a Super Bowl run. And Shakir could kind of be a surprise for us this year as a rookie with his role and how he helps, that Bills offense.
I thought Emmanuel Sanders had to play some pretty critical snaps for him in the middle of the season down the stretch, no longer there. Slide him right into that role, whether it's the 4th receiver, 5th on the pecking order. They love their 10 personnel sets of 4 receivers on the field. So I can really see Khalil Shakir being a great threat in that pass game.
Well, Ben, coming back to you, who's a guy that you feel like has the highest ceiling of their day 3 choices here when it's all said and done?
Well, let's go with a little local love here. And I was so happy to see him taken in the 6th round. It's Villanova corner Christian Benford, who has great size at over 6 feet, over nearly 210 pounds, 4'5", 240, jumped out of the building at his pro day. Strong kid as well, 17 reps at 225. I was really impressed to see them not only scout this kid and then take him in the 6th round. He was gaining a lot of steam throughout the process. Tough kid. I'm really excited for him. I think his ceiling is as high as anyone's in that draft class.
The amount of corners that went in this class, it was like they were one of the positions where it was much higher than a normal year. I think that really speaks to the depth we saw in Benford, one of those guys that kind of snuck in there on the back end of the draft that maybe not everybody was expecting to go, but he certainly heard his name called and has a chance here, like you mentioned, to make an impact on that defense. Dane, when you look at Buffalo, big picture standpoint, any big takeaways? Obviously, this is a team that's gearing up to try and go for a title.
You just hit on it. I think these are finishing pieces. You just want to, they needed a second corner. Okay, Kyrie Elam. You wanted to add a pass catching back. Okay, James Cook in the 2nd round. And you want to add to your linebacker depth. Okay, Terrell Bernard, 3rd round. Then you get Khalil Shakir. You get an upgrade at punter with Matt Araiza in the 6th round. So this is all about those finishing pieces as they try to make that run for the Super Bowl. And for a team picking relatively late in each round, I thought they did a nice job of that.
Let's get to the Jets here. Right? Obviously, a team that had 3 first-round draft choices when it was all said and done, Ben. But we'll stick with the first of their first-round picks. They end up taking Sauce Gardner there at number 4. Ben, in your mind, why was Sauce Gardner the pick? Obviously, a lot of talk about it. Could it be a pass rusher? Could it be a tackle? Why did they go with Sauce?
Well, the other end of the conversation, the Bills getting all those finishing pieces. The Jets are out here pouring concrete. They need foundation pieces. The Bills are looking at drapes and door handles, and the Jets are looking for pillars to hold up the whole house. And that's what you're getting with Ahmad Gardner there. You need a starting corner. You need an alpha presence, a leader, a playmaker, no matter what position it was, really. You need all those things on that roster. Tall, long, rangy, explosive. We talked about him ad nauseum. That's the exact type of impact presence he's going to have with that organization. That is a CEO type of pick, as we call foundation picks for an organization. Not only changes the secondary, the defensive unit, the entire team, the reputation, the feel of that team. He brings an attitude and an alpha mentality.
Well, let's go now to surprise impact, and maybe this won't be a surprise just because of all their picks. I don't think they made a selection. Was it after the 4th round, Dane? So a lot of guys in the top 130 of this draft. But who do you feel has a chance to have the biggest impact here in year 1?
I'll go with Garrett Wilson here, I guess. I mean, the other first-round pick. Just as a rookie, just how long does it take for the receiver to get down the chemistry with the quarterback and get the playbook and understand how to get off press and all these things. I think Garrett Wilson can do that. And so that the Wilson connection, this is all about helping that young quarterback take that next step. Garrett Wilson, I think he could do that. And he's going to be, what you love about Wilson is he can play all over the formation. He's not just an X. He's not just a Y. I mean, he can play all over. And I mean, that's going to be a big part of what they do in offense to help that young quarterback.
Ben, when you get to day 3, you have limited options here, like I said, because I don't think that they didn't make a pick after the 4th round. But day 3 ceiling, who's got the highest here for the Jets?
As much as I think Max Mitchell is going to be the right tackle before the season ends, I really like that fit there, and I think it's a good opportunity for him. It's got to be Michael Clemens, who I think has the highest ceiling out of that group. This guy is long. He is strong. He's heavy-handed. He plays with a good motor. Listen, he's not super fluid or loose or really athletic or sharp-footed, but because of that, he can play some edge on early down, slot him inside in some sub packages and beat up on some unathletic guards, some sub-tight alignment flexibility at 6'5", almost 270 pounds. I think he measured 262 or 265, but can easily add a couple there. So I think Michael Clemens, Texas A&M, he was a good player surrounded by a lot of high-level prospects out there. Really tough-nosed kid in the SEC. He's a good football player.
Hey, John Franklin Myers. It's just kind of another.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Good call.
Yeah.
Man, they have a fun 2 deep really fast between John Franklin Myers. They got Solomon Thomas in free agency. Bryce Huff is a guy that can play. Jacob Martin coming over from the Texans.
Yeah.
Man, if you need some D-line help around this league, go pick up the phone and call Joey Douglas.
Yeah. Well, let's go down to big picture takeaways here, Dane. With thoughts here. Obviously, a lot of talent collected by Joe Douglas and the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different directions we could go here. The fact that they, we saw it last year, trading up for AVT, Vera Tucker in the 1st round. And then we see it again here. Jermaine Johnson. Joe Douglas said after the draft, they got 3 of their top 8 players on their draft board. We knew they loved Jermaine Johnson. It's just, once I'm sure it was hard for them to pass at number 10 and go with the offensive player, but they knew it was important to get that receiver in Garrett Wilson. So they passed on Jermaine Johnson. But then as soon as Jermaine Johnson started to fall, Joe Douglas, he started calling teams at pick 15. And said, okay, what's it going to take to move up? And just started working the phones. Finally, at pick 26, I don't know how Jermaine Johnson fell that far. That's when he was able to make a move without giving up too much draft capital and still holding on to one of those 2nd round picks. Go up, get Jermaine Johnson, get the pass rusher that you wanted. And so just to see them be aggressive for players that they ranked highly is really refreshing for them. And it's also interesting to me that the strength of this draft, outside some of the key players in the 1st round, 3rd round, 4th round, this team did not have a pick after the 4th round. And I think we saw this from a few teams where we don't want 5th, 6th, 7th rounders. There are some good players that get drafted that late, but for the most part, we want players in the top 4 rounds, top 5 rounds, where there's just a higher percentage chance of them coming through for us. So just interesting that the Jets, moving forward, is that going to be more of a philosophy for them, trading a 5th and a 7th to try to get up into the 4th, that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that the Eagles, they gave up 3 picks, but they were all after the 4th round to move up 2 spots to get Jordan Davis. It wasn't, we're going to trade a 3rd. It was, we're going to trade a 4 and 2 5s, right? And so it's kind of interesting to see how that kind of changes from team to team. Let's now go to our last team here, guys. Miami Dolphins. Ben, top choice here for the Dolphins. Didn't come for the first couple of rounds because of the Tyreek Hill trade, but thoughts here with what they did early on in this draft.
Yeah, their first pick being athletic, explosive linebacker Channing Tindall out of Georgia in the 3rd round. No starts in his career despite being a very high-level prospect. They need more speed in the middle of the defense, particularly at linebacker, right in the core nucleus. At the end of the day, he has a high floor of being a special teams ace. He's absolutely a freak show in space. So let him run down on kickoff and punt and all that stuff. So Channing Tindall, 3rd round out of Georgia, I think is going to be a really interesting player for them. Maybe pair him with a Landon Roberts, who's a little bit more of a hammer type of guy, but it's okay, Dolphins fans. You got a lot of new pieces on that offense. Teron Armstead, Connor Williams, Tyreek Hill, a couple new backs, and Raheem Mostert and Chase Edmonds. You got a lot of new juice on the offense.
Well, let's go to a surprise impact here, Dane. Who's the guy that could shock us with what they do on the field here year 1?
Well, I mean, when you look at who they have at the wide receiver depth chart coming into the draft, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and adding in Eric Ezukanma kind of gives him something a little bit different with the size, the physicality that he plays with. Preston Williams is still there, but with Ezukanma, it kind of gives them a little bit different with just how his tracking skills, the way he can go up and win those 50-50 balls. I thought he really developed as a contested catch type of receiver this season. And even though he's, average speed type of guy, but when the ball is in the air, he can go and make plays. And so I think that they limited after the catch. He's not like a Cedric Wilson, who they also added. So I think he just brings something a little bit different to that wide receiver depth chart.
He does. It's interesting. Like you make that comparison between him and like Preston Williams. Like he's that tall, lanky kind of possession or the outside receiver has a lot of those same qualities. Some of those guys you mentioned. Ben, let's go back to day 3 here for the Dolphins. Who do you think has the highest ceiling here?
Well, it's kind of slim pickings here, so I'm quickly browsing their priority free agent lists, which isn't that inspiring either. So let's go back to the Eric Ezukanma well here, who I think can really fill in that profile that was left from Devontae Parker, who they traded to New England, the division rival. But really good size. I think his toughness at the catch point, tough yards after catch, good hands, I think are really, really intriguing traits to survive in the NFL. A little injured, a little banged up down the stretch of the season, also different quarterbacks. Thought he tested really well. I think he's a really nice compliment to the Hills and the Waddles of the world there. So I think diversifying that receiver room is the name of the game on offense. And, he's a guy that was getting a lot of love from people. I see Dane has him ranked over some guys that went in the 3rd round, like Velus Jones and Tyquan Thornton. So I like Eric Ezukanma quite a bit as well. And I hope he can kind of carve out a 3rd, 4th receiver role.
Well, Dane, go big picture here. Any takeaways just from the Dolphins? Obviously, again, small sample size, but first year with Mike McDaniel there as the head coach, Chris Greer still installed there as the general manager. Big picture thoughts here?
Yeah, I don't know how much we can really glean from this. Having only 4 picks, none of the top 100. I think they had to have felt good that a guy like Channing Tindall fell to them at 102 to get a linebacker with that type of speed. I don't think he's going to be starting anytime soon for them. But special teams and a guy you can develop for the future. It's interesting they drafted Skyler Thompson in the 7th over some of the other quarterbacks that were there. Skyler Thompson is a guy that can be mobile, toughness. So just a certain type of quarterback, which is interesting for maybe what they're targeting at the position. But I can guarantee you Miami is looking forward to next year where they have multiple first-round picks and they can have a little bit more fun on draft weekend.
Yeah, different kind of draft outlook for them next year for sure. Well, guys, this has been good. We've gone through 8 teams here, the AFC East, the NFC East. We'll continue doing these over the next couple of weeks. Both of you guys, get some more sleep, get some more rest, and we'll talk to you next week on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by LifeBrand.
Eagles fans, Merrill Reese here to tell you about the Eagles Autism Challenge presented by Lincoln Financial Group. This annual ride, run, walk event supports autism research and programming as we work hard every day to advance the conversation from awareness to action. This year's event will take place on Saturday, May 21st at Lincoln Financial Field. With your support, we can help transform the lives of individuals affected by autism. Register today at eaglesautismchallenge.org.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
All right, Draft Mailbag here. We've got 3 questions I want to make sure we get to, and actually not even questions, just comments from over the course of a draft weekend that I wanted to make sure we gave a shout out to. And again, that's the best way to throw us your support. If you listen to the podcast all leading up to the NFL Draft, the best way to send us your thanks, jump on, leave us a review, leave us a comment with a rating. Really appreciate everybody that has done that, especially these 3 people. Gibby, 5555556, left a 5-star review saying, love all the podcasts and all of the guests. T. Mike Mack left a 5-star review saying, more relative information in 20 minutes than most podcasts in an hour. Mike Mack, I appreciate that. And then Upgraded Tomato left a 5-star review saying, good draft-related podcast. Keep up the great work. So thanks to all of you out there for your continued support of this show and all the rest of our podcasts here with Eagles Entertainment. We'll be back next week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by LifeBrand.